Give it up for the Brooklyn Nomads, everybody. Give it up, give it up, give it up. Amazing performance. Thank you for that. My name is Adam Gagan. I will be your host for the evening. I'm a New York City-based actor, and I've been blessed to have many versatile roles here in the city, ranging from halal guy on Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt to food vendor on Everything's Gonna Be Okay, back to food vendor on FBI. All right, it's gotten to the point where people have asked me if I have a food vendor service. People that know me and know what I do for a living ask me if I'm really a food vendor, because that's how much I stay in character. That's how deep I go, all right? But they have not all been stereotypical roles. I've been a scientist on Stranger Things. I was Al Pacino's Jewish bodyguard in Hunters and a cop on Law & Order SVU, all right? But my favorite role to play is that of a host in front of a live audience, okay? Because for myself and for many people here today, we haven't been able to do this since the beginning of the end. Since everything went down. We haven't been able to do this since February 2020. So this, coming in front of all of you in a live audience, it feels like a new beginning. How does it feel? Yeah, great, right? It feels amazing. Okay, so we are coming to you live from New York City in a studio, and we are also broadcasting via Crowdcast. And we want everybody to feel like they are part of the show, all right? This is a very participatory show. So if you're watching online, there's two ways for you to participate. One is the Ask a Question box on the bottom of your screen. You click on that box and you ask a question. And hopefully throughout the show we will get to your question. The second way you participate is we have a question for you. How do you identify yourself? If you type the answer in the chat, hopefully we'll get a chance to read it during the show. I also have responses from the audience that's here today, and I will go ahead and read one or two of them. Here we go. Answer number one. For how do I identify myself? Person says, a person. Next answer. Person says, now this person wrote a lot. This person wrote Muslim, Egyptian, American, engineer, male, husband, brother, son, friend. Yes. A lot there, a lot. We'll read one more since we're here. This person says artist, woman, mother. Beautiful. Very beautiful. Speaking of woman and mother, my pregnant wife will be coming soon. She's running a little late, but she will be here. Making a baby in this audience as we speak. Yes, that will be lovely. Okay. So, welcome to the M word, artistry and identity. Okay, tonight I want to introduce to you, first of all, the senior director of literary programming and the creator of the M word series. Please give it up to Clarice Rosaj Sharif. Everybody, give it up! Come on.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you. How can I follow you? I mean, this is so unfair. I just want to take it in for a second for those of you who are here with us in the room, and for those of you who are joining us online. I can promise you this feels good. This is so good. I'm really excited about tonight, and I'm really excited about all the many gatherings that we'll have in the coming months. And I invite you to check out actually our sponsors, our partners, our guests tonight. They all are doing amazing events. Just find them and then go and see them and hear more from them. So I have a few cards just to remind me what I'm supposed to say, because it is a little bit intimidating to be doing our first live event from Pen America. So first, I would like to acknowledge that we are in this beautiful studio, the Greene space, and it's one of my favorite live event spaces in New York City. So thank you for hosting us tonight. It's a delight, and we'll be back, I'm sure. The Pen America M Word Town Hall series is made possible thanks to the support of the Doris Duke Foundation for Islamic Arts Building Bridges program. They have been a supporter of the series since 2016, and we are delighted to have them in our corner, and we can't wait to do more. There's one more M Word Town Hall event tomorrow night. Please check the link in the chat, and please register and join us. It's going to be a fantastic conversation. I'll tell you more at the end of the program. And then for those of you who are joining us and do not know enough about PEN America. Let me just say a few words. Our mission is actually to celebrate the power of the written word, the power of storytelling, and to defend free expression here in the US and abroad. And we take this very seriously. We really think that words, stories can change the world. And so please find out more at pen.org and join us. We are a membership organization with members in all 50 states. Tonight, for Identity and Artistry, we have an all-star lineup of artists, performers, writers, scholars, community leaders, and I can't wait to be in the audience listening in. We will discuss the role of artists in understanding the Muslim experience and the power of storytelling to change culture. So now, enough said. I think we're ready to start the show. So here is back to you, Adam.
Right, thank you. Give it up for Clarice, everyone. Please give it up, give it up, give it up. All right. Now, for those joining us from your homes, if you look at the chat, you will find two items. One, this event will be live captioned. So there's a link for that in the chat. And two, you will find information about our participants in the chat. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome our first artist. When I welcome them, you act like we're calling your sister on the stage. You give them all your love. Give it up for Ladan Osman, everyone.
Thank you so much, everybody. Good evening. I'd like to thank PEN and Mosaic on the Greene Space for their invitation and their warmth here. I don't think I've done a reading since like February 2020, and so this is interesting, not in person anyway. And even as I open this book, there's a receipt for a plane ticket in here from like 2019 or 2020, and so I'm like, well, this is the right choice, this poem. And so I'm going to read kind of a poem. It's the last poem in my first book, The Kitchen Dweller's Testimony, about just kind of slow breakthrough and accepting that healing and accepting that it's going to be imperfect, because I think that that's what makes sense for this time. And I would like to also just recognize the incredible suffering that's happened in this city and around the world, and the ongoing suffering in particular with our brethren in India and in Palestine. So this is Western Gate. They say women's dreams stay indoors. These days I dream an ocean under the bed. I wake up and watch its tide. I'm myself, but also a large black bird like the crows near oceans. I sit up in bed. I perch on the concrete sill. I'm big enough to slap pavement upon impact, take running steps to land. I shout for myself to fly, but only look back at myself, and the water rises so the whole room smells like salted water and soaked beans. Have you ever tried to walk when the water recedes, leaving a chain mail pattern in the sand, feet sinking? Have you ever tried to walk, watching the water move and fallen right into it? The sinking woman will try to make waves a column, its froth a steady handhold. I've been having a problem with my eyes. I keep thinking they'll get paper cuts. I squint and reveal floaters on every surface. I could never see past what's right in front of me, and dislike the whole house if it has broken blinds. I can't ignore the shapes floating past my retina. I can't submit. I align them for inspection, the runs in my humor, clogged pipe, jellyfish, the Titanic, they grow with each pass. Look beyond them, my father would say when he'd catch me squinting into light, the other eye wide and rolling, flicking madly to catch any figure. One night, a black spider in my pillowcase. God sent me here to protect you. Okay, I said. Come on in. "Who are you talking to?" my husband asked. I told him a spider with the most beautiful voice would be sleeping with us from now on. From time to time, I would see her outside, dangling at the window, her large abdomen gleaming. At dusk, a katydid at ear level, trilling like a transformer. Every sunset, pray, 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 in currents that grate my heart. But I can't always do it. I hide from it, from the windows. Is there a shadow in the dust? Is there some depression in the dust? Someone please track the visitant whose entrance implies a new dimension. It's as odd as a cat standing before you, watching you pray, claws at your forehead, or pouring skin temperature water over yourself, wondering, have I dressed in unseen garments? Or scripture playing to an empty room. How long will my second self jump up and go for the first exit? After a season of night terrors, leaves, feathers, lapping water, men with lights, then torsos of light, a large bird appeared on the sill. It was bigger than all the others. What do you want? Should I die so you can take this bed? It looked sad and faced westwards, eyes jaundiced, so I sat up and told it to leave. Leave. I flapped my wrists. It turned from me facing west. A breeze lifted a collar of feathers. I was again it, myself. By then, I was ready to go crazy. Lay my head on the bottom of the tub filled with my crazy. And then it flew away. And the torsos and ocean went with it. And I was myself again, and peaceful with my three shadows when walking in any new night. Thank you.
Give it up for Ladan Osman, everyone. Thank you for that beautiful, powerful performance. I will now like to welcome our amazing panel. Of course, Ladan is one of our panelists tonight. Our amazing panelists will start with Hadi Eldebek, musician and social entrepreneur who you have already met from Brooklyn Nomads. Welcome. We have Zainab Mabizari. We have Jafreen Uddin, executive director of the Asian American Writers Workshop. Moustafa Bayoumi, author and journalist. Ladan Osman. Well, first of all, Dr. Donna Auston, welcome. Welcome, doctor, scholar. We're out of order, are we? Okay. Alsarah, singer and singer and songwriter. I thought it said singer and socialite, but no, that didn't say that. Yes. I would love that. Yes. Ladan Osman, welcome back. Poet. And Ibrahim Bechrouri, our moderator for the night. You have your own mic.
Okay. Thank you, Adam. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I'm really honored to be moderating this panel. It's just such an amazing, diverse panel because of the range of talents that we have here. I'm not going to spend too much time introduce you, and I want to jump directly into the questions. One question that is at the center of this event is the question of Muslim identity. And usually when Muslim identity is described, it's something that we describe as the experience of being a minority that exists at the intersection of multiple racial, ethnic, and cultural backgrounds. What do you think of this description? And what do you think also of the term minority, maybe?
We're a majority.
Okay. Can you tell us more about that?
I mean, when you say minority, it implies that it's low in numbers, right? Mm-hmm. If you're looking at actual numbers of the Muslim world, because it's not a single place, numbers-wise, we are a majority. Mm-hmm. So the idea of it being a minority is laughable. And the idea also of it being identifiable as any one thing is also equally laughable. There's as many ways to be Muslim as there are to be Christian, and your commitment to it is up to you. Not every Christian is a nun, and not every Muslim is super religious and wearing a niqab, and sometimes they are, and sometimes it's just, it is such a diverse world that the idea that we need to define it in a seating is just bizarre. So let's start there.
That's right.
You know, I would say, though, for myself, that within the context of the United States, I actually find it empowering to think of myself within the structure of being a minority. You know, I think that the fact is that we should be able to understand the ways in which being Muslim can be dangerous in this country. Right? It has been for a very long time, because we threaten a certain kind of power structure that needs to be threatened, that needs to be challenged, you know? And so I think that there's a lot of power in being minority. I embrace the idea of being minority because it's a way of actually talking back to the majority.
I think for me, one of the ways that I often talk about this in my own work is to use the phrase minoritized, right? Because, you know, because I think it captures in some ways the process of intentional and structural marginalization that happens, right? And so when we think about ourselves, when we talk about minorities, religious minorities, racial minorities, whatever, right? I think that, you know, it's a passive construction that often sort of masks the sense that that people are marginalized by design, right? And so I think this is one way that I think about capturing this. And I think just, you know, in terms of the other question, in terms of, you know, thinking about Muslims at the intersection of all of these various types of identities, I mean, in my own writing and my own work, you know, part of my research is about Black Muslim activism. This is my dissertation work. But one of the ways that I tend to approach this in my scholarship is to think about Muslims as whole people. And so, like, sort of the Muslim is almost maybe last, right? It's not the only, and it's not necessarily the most important thing that I need to know about this person or this population that I'm studying. I also need to know, how they move through the world as a racialized subject, right? I need to know what their gender brings into it. I need to know what economic class does to people. I need to know, you know, I need to know all of these different things about what makes, and I think those things actually shape the Islam and not necessarily the reverse. I mean, I think a lot of times we think about this as, you know, Muslim sort of orders everything about people who identify as such. And I think that we miss a lot when we look at it that way.
And that kind of shows the limitation of the language itself.
Yeah.
Like when we talk about this, we are requiring context. Minority in which place? If you are defining majority and minority in numbers, as we agreed on. But there is oftentimes the context is being kind of filled in for us, especially in media. Like it's when you say Muslim, like if you identify as a Muslim, what kind of information would that give me to base my behavior and interaction with you upon? I don't have enough information. You could drink alcohol. You could not be praying. You could not have gone to the Hajj. You could have views on gays and homosexuality that are uncommon with those who are conservative Muslims, etc. So I don't have enough information from just one term. And we require context, and we require especially in the context of conversation, not to have someone else fill in those gaps for us.
I think that this is in which the context, those in power in America have always historically minoritized. I really like that word, minoritized people, because what they do is they take one word, one image, and they reduce it so small that people cannot conceptualize or understand the intersectionality in which many people present with their identities. And so when people think Muslim in this country, at least what they thought in 2001 and 2002, painted what the world thought about Muslim. They do not know that, for example, Indonesia has the most Muslims in the world, and they're not even represented in our media or what Muslims look like. They don't recognize that all over Africa, there are Muslims, right? You have Muslims in East Africa and West Africa and North Africa. You have Muslims in the Middle East. And when you reduce an entire group of people with intersectional identities to one thing, that's how you oppress them. And that's how you are able to control their narrative, which is why it is so important for us to speak up about who we are. And this is why I really love the term minority in a way, because it empowers and it strengthens us. I think being minoritized in a way has given me my voice, because I recognize that if I do not speak, then someone else's voice will occupy that space. You know, in the grand scheme of things, I really don't believe there's such a thing as silence. Because if you are silent, someone else's voice will take over yours. And so you have to use your voice, because your story and all of our collective stories need to come together to show people who we are as a group, so that they know that, yes, we are a large group. You can't reduce us to just a few numbers or just a few stereotypes that you see on TV.
And I'll add, I mean, echoing everything that everyone said, but I think it's important. We can do two things at once, right? We can understand the diversity of the community and appreciate kind of the vast array of experiences, but also recognize the power of a shared experience of faith and being kind of lumped together in that way as the Muslim community. It requires a lot more nuance than I think most public discourse allows for, but I think it's just worth recognizing that both things can be true and can happen at the same time, and probably should be happening at the same time.
I liked what was brought up about being minoritized, being reduced, because, I mean, you all hear amazing writers, artists, and I feel like the job of an artist is really to expand the limit of what is possible. That's the same for a writer, in my opinion, and writers are artists. How do you manage in that situation in which maybe your identity or multiple of your identities are being reduced, are being minoritized? How do you manage to still expand the limits of what is possible?
Being unapologetic, 100%. Enter the space with your full and entire being. And I found that in a lot of spaces in which I navigate, being a Muslim woman, especially a woman who wears hijab, people really tend to want to tokenize me. And so they will give me an entrance because they're saying, oh, this will be our hijab-wearing Muslim woman. But what I think is, how else am I going to bring people into the room with me? What does representation mean? How can I really broaden the scope of those around me, given this small opportunity that they think that they're using for power over me, but that I could really use as an advantage for my community and to bring all the people that I love and all the stories and all the experiences they have to the rest of the world. And I think that part is so important, that knowing that you are powerful, you are amazing, you shouldn't have any imposter syndrome in whatever space you walk into, and then just really leaning into all the identities you have.
Ladan, I'm wondering how this identity and the identities maybe that are pushed on you influence your artistic practice. We just listened to your poem, and I think it made a good job at broadening our perspective. I'm wondering how this affects you, not necessarily like, in a bad or good way, but how does that has an impact on your creative process?
Thank you. I knew I'd get called on. I was just looking around like, maybe they won't notice I'm not saying anything. So I think one thing to consider is that the erasure of different stories and perspectives is very willful, is very violent, and is very persistent. And that if my work is in adding to the archive, is in storytelling, is in human participation, that's something that I have to be aware of. And I just think it's one of the weird things of being a human, is that you know what your identity is in the world, or some of the lanes that have already been prescribed for you, which may not fit or oftentimes are not comfortable, especially, if you have been set at the margins. But then at the same time, who you actually are, which is dynamic and changeful and very vast, but also very intimate and small at the same time. And just as someone who's making art, like, I feel like sometimes I have to do certain things or be considerate of just showing up in service or in teaching, because it's so easy to just get sick of yourself. It's so easy, like when you're an artist, for your world to recognize your own vastness and to mirror that back and forth, that you need other people and you need to start to trouble the relationships that you have in the world and to identity and the relationships that the world has to you. And I think, I'm a taller woman, I'm Black, I'm not always fitting super well into certain gender things. I struggle to deeply care what people think. Like, I've had a lot of problems, and that kind of double consciousness, which layers and fractures out, that was an understood, even if I didn't have the language for it, reality from by the time I was 7 or 8 years old. Like, I could understand there are some people who think that I'm ugly. They think that and ugly in the sense of, like, my soul is ugly. Like, I should not be here, or I should not be alive, or I should not be able to partake in the things that other people do. And I knew that as a child, because I was threatened as a child, I was menaced as a child, authority figures participated in that sometimes. And so you have to always be mindful of, like, what is this other thing that is going to carry me through and makes it so my ability to love and to practice love and to perform in service and freedom is never altered or stripped from me. And so it is just like the work that I have to do for art is very similar to the work that I have to do, like, just as a human, my human work. So
that was beautiful. Thank you for sharing. I'm wondering about something. There is another, at least for me, there is another side of that, like, being Muslim experience. Being Muslim can also be like a community experience, a spiritual experience. And definitely it helped me in my scholarship, it helped me in my art. I wanted to know how that has, like, helped you or oriented you in your crafts.
I think for me, one of the, it's interesting because my spiritual orientation, like I converted to Islam as a teenager, and part of that, a huge part of that motivation and that process of discovery for me was trying to understand myself as a Black woman, as a young Black woman, right? Malcolm X over hip hop beats and all those sorts of things was, a large part of that particular journey. But I've carried a lot of that with me, and this spiritually for me is not just, or spirituality for me is not just about, the ritual stuff, right? The praying, the fasting, right? That stuff is all important, but it's also about an orientation to the world that makes me get up in the morning and try to figure out how I can make this world a more humane place to live. How is it that we can bring greater measures of equality into the world? How do we protect the vulnerable? How do we make sure that that people don't live with lack or live with violence, live with insecurity, right? These are spiritual practices, right? And very much a part of what drew me to Islam and what has kept me here all of these years. And so this is, I think for me, this comes out in my writing, but it comes out in my teaching. It comes out in, in my public engagement with audiences, right? It comes out in every way that I can think to bring it out, right? Because this is the mission here, right? It's not just about, being cloistered. When you say religion or when you say spirituality, this is what a lot of people think. You're sort of cloistered in a house of worship, and it's you and God. But you and God is also how you interface with creation, right? And that means seeking justice. That means doing all of these other things, right? And so for me, it's when I stand in a classroom and I'm trying to teach a bunch of undergrads about how race works, right? That's spiritual work. It's soul work. Anti-racism is soul work. economic justice is soul work. You know, so yeah, it's everywhere.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I feel that one of the core essence of Islam is this social justice, this striving towards social justice, and I think that's something that has motivated me in all of my work. I mean, I believe in everything from a free Palestine to a free Brittany. You know, sorry, folks. I had to get that in there. So, yeah. But part of that too is that it creates community. You know, it also creates a community that doesn't necessarily even have to be solely a Muslim community. Sometimes it even puts you at odds with some parts of the Muslim community. But that can still be its own kind of spiritual practice, to echo what you're saying as well. And it's an interesting experience walking even just the streets of New York City as a Muslim person. I mean, I don't know how identifiable I am as a Muslim, and I don't wear hijab, or you know, I don't have a two-fisted beard or such things, right? And yet, still, at the same time, you walk the streets of New York City, and I get salam alaikums to me all the time. I get, you know, you get the tip of the hat, you get, or maybe not the hat, but you get acknowledgments all the time, and it creates. There is a certain sense of a global, brotherhood and sisterhood, this global community that you're a part of, and I think that that's it means that you're also cognizant that you're creating for something that's bigger than you. I think at the same time, right? So I'm always when I'm writing, I'm always thinking about a community at the same time that I'm writing. I don't know what it's like to write as a white cisgender male writer in the United States. I read them all the time. Some of the work is fantastic, but I just have no idea what that would be like to write from that point of view, where you don't have a specific community that you feel responsible to, and you're obliged to understand what their concerns are and be responsive to those concerns. So I feel like that is a core practice that I willingly take on, and I think it actually deepens and enriches the kinds of work that I do as well. I hope it does. You know, somebody brought up Du Bois already. I referenced Du Bois in my book, How Does It Feel to Be a Problem?, which is a question that Du Bois asks in The Souls of Black Folk. And it's funny, when I teach The Souls of Black Folk, or when I talk about Du Bois in class, students often talk about double consciousness as a kind of tragedy. But I've never thought of the idea of double consciousness as a tragedy. This idea that the world sees you, but you also see how the world sees you. So you have both the way of understanding how people see you and who you are. You have two visions. Yeah. That's a plus, that's not a minus. It gives you more stories, because you actually can respond to the idiocies of their stories. It's a comedy, it's not a tragedy, you know, double consciousness. And it gives you more ability to, I think, engage the world responsibly, communally, and with a lens of social justice at the back of it as well.
Sarah, I heard you saying Ummah at the point. Could you tell us what that means for you, and also, like, you know, how it resonates with you?
Well, the idea of the Ummah is it's basically a unified nation under the umbrella of Islam, right? And the idea, and the word is used very commonly in Islam. And for a long time, I had a lot of issues with it, because I felt like a lot of my identity was erased inside the greater concept of Ummah, especially because for a long time, the idea of Islam was very much tied to the idea of Arabness. And as someone who's from a part of the world that was colonized by Arabs and Islam, I had a lot of tension around that. And so I had a lot of tension around the idea of Ummah in general. But what brought me back to it, actually, interesting enough, was September 11. And what happened here, and the way the world reacted to Islam and to us and to this idea of Ummah. And I finally began to see what my role could be inside of this, which is to really, like you said, walk in with your full presence, and as well as really no space for silence. I didn't want my story and my relationship to Islam to be defined by others as well, and that included other Muslims. I wanted to make sure that I had a part in how I told my story and how I told my relationship to Islam, because for so many of us, we're culturally Muslim. Like, I don't know where, it's hard to tell where your culture stops and Islam starts, and it's not, and it doesn't look the same in different places, but there's these cornerstones and pillars and that actually unify you through the year, through the Muslim year, if you think about it. And those are the moments I actually remember I'm Muslim. I don't remember the rest of the year at all. So it's just, and so for me, I embrace that word now because I feel like it's really where we're walking towards in general. For me, as somebody who doesn't believe in modern day borders, who doesn't believe in the idea of controlling movement and migration, who believes that you have to seek justice because it's soul work. You have to, social justice is an integral part of all of this. It became about what can you bring into this ummah? How do we find the positive parts of globalization? And under the term ummah, I felt like I could see that vision.
It's funny, I think you put any number of Muslims together, and at the point we're going to talk about 9/11. 9/11 is going to come up.
Well, that's when we remembered we were Muslim.
Yeah. It's also interesting because the 20 years anniversary of the war on terror is in a couple months. So September 11, 2021. And I'm wondering, there's a lot of you here that maybe are my age, a bit older than me maybe. Growing up during that era of like the post 9/11 era, the era of the global war on terror in America, and at the same time thriving as artists, how did you manage to do that?
So there's a quote that I recall from, he's a New York City imam, actually, Imam Talib Abdul Rashid, African-American imam at Mosque of Islamic Brotherhood. And there was an article that he was interviewed, some news article that I saw back then. And they asked him about what it felt like on September 11th, and he was just like, or after September 11th, and he said it felt like being black twice. And so I think, I always come back to that often, because it was like, okay, like, I grew up African American. It was already on site with white America. So it was just like, okay, so so now we're adding this other stuff to it, but the narratives about being a threat, being inherently criminal, about being perceived in a particular way just because of who you are, and being treated like that, right, by the surveillance state, by the law enforcement apparatus, by the criminal justice system, was already a part of my growing up. So it was like, it was like being black twice now, right? But it wasn't something that was unfamiliar. And so the task was always to just be in spite of that, right? This was always what the mandate was, right? And so I think, when those years and the years that followed, it's just like, all right, now we still need to make sure that we understand our own humanity. Right? It's not necessarily my job to convince other people who are not inclined to see me as a full human being. That's not my job. I don't wake up in the morning thinking, how can I convince people who don't mean me any good, right? To accept me as a human being, because it's not, my humanity is not theirs to confer or withhold. Right. Mm-hmm. So I think, was it an intense period? Has it, yes. Right. I don't mean that to say that, it was just nothing, but it was also, it was part of how America had always operated. And unfortunately, it took, for some segments of our ummah, it took something, it took them experiencing it to see it. You know, so I mean, it's, you know, we got to do what we always, you know, the game is always the game, right? We have to sort of just, you know, make sure that we understand what we're supposed to be doing.
Well, what you're saying is really fascinating because went through my work, like in New York City, interviewing among others, Black Muslim individuals. This is not the first time I hear that quote, and I heard it from different individuals that didn't even know each other. And it always brought me back to, so Mos Def Yasin Bey, who's a Black Muslim rapper, musical artist. He has this album that came out in 1999 that's called Black on Both Sides. And in this album, he actually talks, it's before 9/11, but he talks about surveillance in relation to Islam and how we should not fear that because fear not of men, men must die, and God is above that. So I think it's extremely powerful. I think it ties to that. It shows how, for Black American Muslims, that experience was really different than from others, and because also it tied to another experience and added to the burden in a way. Thank you for bringing that up. Jafreen, I think,
Yeah, no, I was just going to add, you know, I think we talked a little bit about the shared humanity among the Muslim community. There's also a shared relationship to oppression that needs to be recognized and kind of understood. And, you know, both within the community, but also in our connection to other communities. I think if you think about this past year and the rise of anti-Asian violence and, you know, the Atlanta attack, in March against, you know, women of mostly Asian descent, you know, it's all rooted in white supremacy. We all have, each of our communities in different ways have had relationships to imperialism, and our communities have been impacted by it. So a lot of times the way it's talked about in the public is much more siloed of like, this is the Muslims' time to be oppressed, or this is, you know, the Black community's time, or whatever. And instead, I think we're all better off if we kind of step back and recognize the root core of it is white supremacy and imperialism, and it's all connected in a way that isn't necessarily talked about as much.
So maybe a last question on that, and then we'll open it to the audience. If you have questions, feel free to write them down and pass them to Aya over there. She will bring them to me, and I'll be able to add them to the panelists. But one question that I wanted to ask, and that goes with what you said. So we recognize that there is oppression beyond the Muslim community. There is double oppression, triple oppression, really often for members of the Muslim communities because of the different identities they have. How do we use that positionality, being Muslim, but also Islam being at the intersection of all these different identities to create allyship, maybe, and to create allyship through art? Because I think, again, art is something that can build bridges.
I think a lot of what was said already really ties into this idea beautifully. I think at the, my fellow panelists, I think a lot of the core of our spirituality in Islam does fall on this idea of justice. And I think when you have a strong core of what justice means to you, then the answer becomes very easy, because you start seeing the oppression all over the world. You start seeing, like, you can be a white passing Arab Muslim and realize, because of what happened in 9/11, that even that is not safety for you, because the idea of white supremacy is so wide-spanning that you can never be part of that. This model minority myth that a lot of people immigrated with, so a lot of Asians fall within this category as well, that if you work hard enough, if you are educated, that maybe you can attain the same sort of whiteness that everybody else has. That's not correct in this country, because there will always be something that they will use to oppress you. And so I think in recognizing all of these connections, it becomes very international in context. You look at the work of Angela Davis, who does this beautifully, where she says, everything that's happening here in America is happening all over the world. If you look at the history of slavery, Black Lives Matter, Stop Asian Hate, what's going on in Palestine, what's going on with the Uyghurs, what's going on all over the world, it's a common core of oppression, of putting a group of people down for their beliefs, for how they look, for their economic status. And once we have that strong sense of being of what justice means to us, this idea that we can't fight for others, or that we cannot be allies with others, or we cannot connect with others, doesn't become a concept anymore. Because you realize it's your duty as a human being who believes in justice, who believes in morality, to speak up for those who do not have the chance to speak for themselves until they are able to have their voice to speak for themselves. And I think that's why it's so important to recognize what has happened to us in the context it has happened to us, and why this is precisely why we should be allies with different communities who are facing the same things under different names, because this is all under the umbrella of white supremacy.
Anything else anyone would like to add?
I think it's important to, look to our individual traditions to find kind of shared purposes and shared ways of moving forward. I'm going to use the opportunity to plug a project at the Asian American Writers Workshop. We launched last year a Black and Asian Feminist Solidarities Project, which is an editorial piece, an editorial project hosted in our magazine. And every month we work with the Asian American Feminist Collective and Black Women Radicals to publish any piece of work. We do fiction, nonfiction, interviews, whatever, but it's looking at the ways that Black and Asian feminist practices can inform a path toward liberation. And it's really embracing this idea that, we have our individual traditions, we have our individual histories and ancestors to look to. Well, where can we find commonality, and how can we use that as a model of solidarity moving forward? So it's an editorial project, but I think the spirit of it speaks to what can be happening in more actionable ways.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you. That was so interesting. Such an amazing conversation. It's not done yet, though. We have some questions from the audience, and I'm going to read the first one. So, the first question is: post-pandemic, what will be required to preserve the communities that we created in the virtual world?
I think one of the one of the opportunities that presented with the pandemic, I think, was the opportunity to look at the ways that we are, or have been, or have not been, in many cases, caring for people, and making sure that we are looking to those who are most vulnerable and figuring out how are most excluded or most marginalized, and figuring out how we can attend to their needs, right? So I think if we lead with that, coming out of the pandemic, I hope we are coming out of the pandemic. As I think it's important to recognize that the receding of the pandemic is not equal across the world, right? Mm-hmm. And this is a very important. We're hearing here that it's over, basically, right? But it's certainly not the case around the globe. But I think really keeping in mind, right, that we're the way that this particular global challenge has progressed, I think, has demonstrated in ways that other types of challenges that we've all experienced, as parts of humanity, has not. And that's the sense that, like, we are, it sounds like super cheesy, right? But we are really all in this together. Mm-hmm. And right, and if these people are not rid of the virus, right, we all are still in danger, right? And so there's no way to really siphon off, right? And so I think, all of the various things that have happened, like thinking about, for example, we were just having this conversation in the Greene room, just about, the hope that we can, for example, make, continue this, this practice of, making programs at least hybrid, right? Because there were always people, who have, disabilities or other types of issues that prevent them from coming out to an event in person, we're able to access conversations for the first time. We're able to sort of, talk across communities globally, right? Because the event is live streamed, right? In ways that was very difficult to do in many cases and probably most cases before. So, I mean, I think if we can sort of take that insight and take that spirit of, hey, like we're all sort of suffering this thing together and we're all trying to figure out ways to be connected while we try to fight this global health challenge, right? If we can sort of take that spirit and implement it, in various ways, right? I think that will inspire us, right? That will show us how to, there's 1,000 ways that might look, right, in different contexts. But I think leading with that spirit of interconnectivity will certainly help us to do that sort of thing.
And I think we just can't forget what happened this past year as well.
Absolutely.
We can't forget what happened to our healthcare workers. We can't forget George Floyd. We can't forget the crimes against the AAPI community. We can't forget Sheikh Jarrah or Sliwan or all of these things that happened. If you look at what happened in this past year and how much the fabrics of society revealed itself and all this education that people who were once maybe shielded from all of that underwent to be able to recognize a lot of what was happening in all of our communities, I think the major thing that you can do is just not forget everything that happened, to continue educating yourself, to continue caring for each other and reaching out your hand, because the worst thing you can do is to go back to normal and go back to what the society feeds you and what capitalism feeds you, and to just kind of go to the next news cycle, because that's what they want you to do. They want you to forget. And we can't forget what happened this past year.
Do we have time for another question? Yeah? Okay. So we have another question from the audience. This one says, Islam is many things all at once. What role does contradiction play in your art? Do you feel a need to resolve that contradiction? Why or why not?
Well, art to me is really about a celebration of tension and release. So the more contradictions you have going on inside you, the more tension and release we can have. So I always think of it as a positive thing to have a very complicated relationship with whatever it is you came out of.
If there's no contradiction in art, then that sounds more like propaganda to me.
That's good.
I think that the human condition, I think it's nothing exclusive to Islam either. This is about the human condition. And that is one that is rife with complexity, contradiction, turmoil, dismay, all of those emotions, all of those ways of being. And I think that this idea of resolving them is seeking resolution is what the art form is. Not even finding the resolution; it's the search for the resolution. Otherwise, if you think that you have the answers, then I don't want to hear them.
Yeah. Agreed.
I think that the personal quest, the personal journey, is what drives my artistry more than anything else. And sometimes it is driven by culture, and different elements of culture. Sometimes it's driven purely by experience. And what I try to get out within me is something that helps me go deeper within me. And that could help others, that could connect with others. But sometimes it is definitely influenced by all these elements of culture that Islam is one part of, that my Islam is one part of. Because my experience with the set of values of this religion, of this philosophy, of this system, is different than someone else in different parts of the world. And that's, again, to me, words have not as much value as others place on for me. Like, there is always this one title and then underneath it, like all of this thousands of other words that could define it better, that could make it clearer. So to answer that question, for me, arts is about exploring my personal journey with the hope that that would connect with someone else, and not about clearing or clarifying anything for someone out there.
Okay, I have a last question, and that's going to be the opportunity to bring all of you into the conversation again. And I kept it for the end because I think it's a great question because I'm curious too. The question is, that's fine. The question is, what do you hope to achieve as an artist? It's not what are your projects necessarily, but what do you hope to achieve as an artist, as a person who engage in a craftsmanship. Do you want to start and then we go?
I mean, self-actualization, I guess. Yeah, I wanna find more and more within myself.
Zainab?
Oh man. The word that keeps popping into my head is catharsis. I just want to be able to release everything and just to let it exist.
So I'm not an artist, but I work with artists and I work with writers, and I think, what we think about a lot is, are we allowing our writers and our community of artists to be as selfish as possible in their work, and really being able to tell the truest story on their own terms. And so my focus is always on helping make that possible for our community.
Beauty, I think. I think that there's a place for searching for the beautiful, but there's beautiful in everything, right? There's something that's ugly is beautiful. And it's understanding what the nature of beauty is. And the nature of beauty is truth, beauty, if you want to go back to the Romantic poets. It's just the same way that a world that gives correctly, equally, rightfully, and righteously to everybody would be a beautiful world too.
I would like, when I am writing or, engaged in that sort of activity, I'm looking for a community of people to think with. And I want my ideas to, primarily because I think, people are smarter than me, right? So like if we think together, right, it's so much more enriching and so much more rewarding than if you do it alone, right? It's cool to think alone, right? I'm an introvert. Trust me, I enjoy that part of it. But really wrestling with life's dilemmas and questions in community with other people and in conversation with other people is really something special.
Thank you so much for moderating as well, and for everybody that shared questions with us. I think some sense of just recognition for people to have, even if they don't necessarily like the work, that they have some understanding that I'm not fooling around, I'm not making fun of people, I'm not interested in exclusion. And then beyond that, welcome or encouragement for the artists who are still working or who are outsider artists, or they've been trying for 20, 30, 40, 50 years and have not gotten their chance, or the people who are not born yet or may not be born for generations. For, it would be amazing, even if it's just, one person stumbles across the work and they feel like they can do something. That was very hard for me to have physical, tangible proof was possible for me. Not only when I was a child, but right up until finishing a graduate program. And so yeah, I think that that's probably the thing that helps me keep going, is to imagine like how all the people before me have helped me, how I don't know how I can imagine my life if I didn't have Jamaica Kincaid or Lucille Clifton or Toni Morrison's work. Where would I be? I would like to imagine that, you know, there's someone who can just find some sort of recognition. They don't have to learn off of it. I don't have to be Jamaica Kincaid to them. Just, you know, it's one avenue that by then it's just like a huge selection of, you know, African, you know, women writers and Somali American people and people from all over different parts of underrepresented diasporas are just able to be in conversation with each other even would be wonderful.
I think I just want to start trouble. I'm serious. I just want to leave every room having made someone think and actually start some troubles. I want you all to go and start a fight because then things will get better. So that's all I want.
Hopefully, inshallah. Really inspiring. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for, yeah, please, can we... That was an amazing panel. Thank you all for making time for us. Thank you.
Give it up for our moderator. During the conversation, everybody said at least one thing that I really connected with and really resonated for me and brought back even childhood memories for me. You know, because growing up, my father was Muslim, my mother was Christian, then she converted to Judaism. So identity was very important for them and kind of defined for me as a young boy. So it really made me think and kind of try to figure out who I am at a young age. And it didn't, the contradiction, like you said, the contradiction kind of fueled me and made me a broader person. It didn't really confuse me, but it kind of gave me a better understanding of people around me. And so I would say I wasn't confused up until one point in my life because everything at a young age was all lessons from the Bible, lessons from the Quran, lessons from the Old Testament. So when I went to school, just regular grade school, and they started talking about Abraham Lincoln, I thought this was the same Abraham from the Bible and from the Quran. And I was like, wait, how did they let him almost sacrifice his son in the United States of America? Like, this is really confusing for me. So that was the only point that I got confused. But thank you for bringing up that memory and all these other memories tonight. So one more round of applause for all of our panelists. Thank you. Thank you. And now we have a very special performer. Let's give it up for Alsarah and Michael Birdie.
This song is composed by Ahmed Munib, who passed away in the early 90s, a really famous Nubian composer and musician. And I love this song in particular because he was the father of a genre called the Songs of Return, or Aghani al-Awda, which was a genre of music that came to be after the largest displacement in Nubian history when the Aswan High Dam was built. And so from this great tragedy, so much beauty and art came to be. From this displacement, from all the contradictions and the tension, release needed to happen. And so Aghani al-Awda is really what brought me home to myself and to seeking art as a way of expressing identity. So this song is called Bilad al-Dahab, or the Land of Gold.
يا بحري هدي هدي خلينا عدي عدي يا بحري هدي هدي خلينا عدي عدي يا شط الأمان يا حضن الحنان يا شط الأمان يا حضن الحنان أنا إنسان عنواني بلاد الذهب أنا إنسان عنواني بلاد الذهب يا بحر هدي هدي خلينا عدي عدي يا بحر هدي هدي خلينا عدي عدي يا شط الأمان يا حضن الحنان يا شط الأمان يا حضن الحنان أنا إنسان عنواني بلاد الذهب أنا إنسان عنواني بلاد الذهب في شطك يا نيل يا حبي وحياتي في ظل النخيل كانت ذكرياتي في شطك يا نيل يا حبي وحياتي في ظل النخيل كانت ذكرياتي وأحلى الغناوي بتحكي الحكاوي وأحلى الغناوي بتحكي الحكاوي يا شط الأمان يا حضن الحنان يا شط الأمان يا حضن الحنان أنا إنسان عنواني بلاد الذهب أنا إنسان عنواني بلاد الذهب في شطك يا نيل يا حبي وحياتي في ظل النخيل كانت ذكرياتي في شطك يا نيل يا حبي وحياتي في ظل النخيل كانت ذكرياتي وأحلى الغناوي بتحكي الحكاوي وأحلى الغناوي بتحكي الحكاوي يا شط الأمان يا حضن الحنان يا شط الأمان يا حضن الحنان أنا إنسان عنواني بلاد الذهب أنا إنسان عنواني بلاد الذهب أنا إنسان عنواني بلاد الذهب أنا إنسان عنواني بلاد الذهب
Michael Birdie.
Give it up again for Alsarah and Michael Birdie. Next up, we have Zainab Mabizari.
So the poem I am about to recite is called Ballot Box. I wrote it a couple of years ago, and it saddens me that it's still relevant to this day, but it speaks a lot of my own ancestry as the daughter of Algerian immigrants and Algerian warriors, and it talks a lot about the Algerian Revolution, but you will see that there are very common themes among them. I talk politics with my ancestors' tongue. I am asked, who do you think will be president? And I spill out records like a needle beckoning sound to come out. I will not be played. Truth is buried these days, and we are too afraid of death to be grave diggers. My parents know to not be afraid of cemeteries because my parents' bodies were tossed into cemeteries, and they know that the grave you should be terrified of is the grave that forgets it is God you will return to. They say, fighting for freedom is the only way to rest in peace. So I have been raised to speak, because freedom consists in knowing when freedom is in peril. It stirs in those who pay attention, not those silent to oppression or trauma or scandal, not threatened with gunshots of terror from skins of ghosts wearing straitjackets, hiding beneath sheets of thoughts and prayers. We cleanse bodies of the violence committed in lands these representatives refuse to give to them. Representation has always been a no man's land, and homes have been stolen from these lands. So when bodies are tossed into caskets, who is it that's truly being represented? My parents' spilled their blood for the ballot. And now my parents' grandchildren are on streets with signs protesting the government's complacency and corruption. Where is the infrastructure our parents' died for? Where is the liberation that sings from their grave? Oil is money and slick skin. Oil is spilling wealth into oceans instead of our people. Oil is what makes our couscous sweet, and oil is what the civilized will send drones for. Oil drips off our skin to Western eyes that gaze at ways they can excavate our bodies, extract from this earth our crude melanin, and westernize our bodies. I say, these candidates do not speak for me yet. They are looking for numbers, and I am not a token or statistic. I mean, I am a token statistic. I mean, I do not wish to be a token. I mean, I pray to God. I'm not another statistic. I mean, I pray to God. I do not become a hashtag. I mean, I talk politics because my body is political, because my walk is political, because this country's ideology doesn't recognize the phenomenal grace when I stand with my head held high, because my parents' gave their life to dictate their own politics. And I stand on streets paved by a legacy carried on airplanes and crossing borders. Revolutions are started by walls that create borders to keep the people that were kicked out from coming back in. I mean, my body is a border. I mean, borders are sites of resistance. Resistance is my body existing in existence. I am the revolution. If you ask me, I will talk politics with a tongue that curls from propaganda. It will not remain silent. My parents' tongues were not silent. My parents' tongues were not silent because they know silence is the noose power will hang you from. And my parents' taught my parents at all cost, do not let them string a bag around your neck. At all cost, do not let them sweep the life from beneath your feet. At all cost, do not let them bury you in a godless grave. And so I am asked, when will a person like you become president? Thank you.
Give it up for Zainab Mabizari, everyone. Now, throughout the night, we got many more responses on how people identify. We got these responses via Crowdcast and in our crowd here, and I would like to read some of them. This person says, creative immigrant, third culture kid, global citizen, Muslim woman. My identity is continuously evolving, and I'm grateful for that. This person says, daughter of diaspora, sister, wife, friend, aspirational artist. a proud Scorpio. And lastly, a Russian. So thank you all for bringing all of your identities into this space and bringing your whole self into this space. And we would also like to thank our partners tonight, Performing Arts Mosaic and Sapelo Square. And we'd like to thank our sponsor, the Doris Duke Foundation for the Islamic Arts Building Bridges Program. And last but not least, all of you for coming out and all the people who watch this show online. Give it up for yourselves, please. And the M-Word Town Hall is not over. There will be another event tomorrow night. Here are the details. The M-Word Town Hall, Power and Politics of Pop Culture, 9 p.m. tomorrow night on Crowdcast. And they have an amazing lineup for that show, so make sure you attend. And last but not least, Brooklyn Nomads, can you take us away?
Let's do it.
All right, give it up. Give it up for the Brooklyn Nomads.
يا ويلي ويلي منها هل شغلتني بسرها يا ويلي ويلي منها هل شغلتني بسرها والله تبع اثرها مهما تكون النهايه عالمايا عالمايا على عيني يا ملايا يا بنية ضل سقيني عطشان سقيني مايا وعالمايا عالمايا على عيني يا ملايا يا بنية ضل سقيني عطشان سقيني مايا.
How are you guys doing? Good? One more song? All right, this one I would like your participation. Can you say Ya Baba? Allah, Allah, Ya Allah, Allah, Ya Baba, وسلام عليك. الله الله وسلام عليك سيدي منصور نيجيك نزور سيدي منصور نيجيك نزور يا بابا. You got it. Kick us out. بالله ما عشقت سواه أشهد بالله ما عشقت سواه جرح الحبيب على شي صعيب وش حاليتي ملهوف عليك واشهد بالله ما عشقت سواك ونجيك يا سيدي ونجيك يا سيدي بجمع فيدي بشمع فيدي والنار في قلبي والنار في قلبي تحرق وريدي تحرق وريدي. الله الله يا بابا وسلام عليك يا بابا. الله الله يا بابا وسلام عليك يا بابا. سيدي منصور يا بابا نيجيك نزور يا بابا. سيدي منصور يا بابا نيجيك نزور يا بابا. الله الله يا بابا وسلام عليك يا بابا. الله الله يا بابا وسلام عليك يا بابا نيجيك نزور يا بابا.
Muhammad Sherhabil on electric bass, Daru Behrouzi on winds, Nazih Hantakli on percussion. My name is Hadi on oud and buzuk. We are the Brooklyn Nomads.